Thanks to all the subscribers. Please like, subscribe, and comment. With that out of the way, let's get into it. Peter "Pistol" Pete Rollack was born in 1975 to Leonard and Brenda Rollack in the Soundview neighborhood of the predominantly Hispanic Clazen Point section of the South Bronx. The Bronx is the northernmost of New York City's 5 boroughs. He grew up in the Soundview Houses, a housing project comprised of 13 7-story buildings. Soundview Houses itself is one of 10 such housing projects located in the neighborhood. Brenda left Leonard when Peter was 3 years old and consequently raised him alone. On December 2, 1977, his father, Leonard P.D. Rollack, along with 10 other defendants including Harlem heroin kingpin Leroy "Nicky" Barnes, was convicted of conspiracy to violate federal narcotics laws. Rollack, along with Barnes and Guy Fisher, was specifically charged with possession and distribution of 107.6 grams of heroin during the 10-day trial, but the jury failed to reach a verdict with respect to Fisher, and Barnes was acquitted of that particular charge. Rollack's charge stemmed from his sale of 1/8 of a kilogram of heroin to DEA informant Robert Geronimo and undercover DEA agent Luis Diaz for $8,300 on November 29, 1976. He in fact told both Fisher and Geronimo that he suspected that the buy money was marked after the transaction. On October 27, 1987, the elder Rollack was indicted for the murder of Norman Bannister, as well as for conspiracy to commit murder, 2 counts of possession of heroin with intent to distribute in 2 separate locations in the Bronx, New York, and distribution of heroin in July of 1983 in Manhattan, New York. Rollack and 6 other defendants were charged with conspiring to distribute heroin throughout Manhattan and the Bronx, New York, Bridgeport, Connecticut, Boston, Massachusetts, and Washington, D.C. from January 1, 1980 to October 31, 1987, as members of a heroin ring headed by James Jackson, who, ironically, agreed to cooperate with the government and acted as the chief witness for the prosecution. While awaiting trial, Rollack himself stated on a recording made by a wired prison informant that he'd made $30,000 profit per week from drug sales. Though he was offered a 15-year plea deal, Rollack jumped bail and wasn't apprehended again until months later. After being educated in the Catholic school system for most of his childhood, Peter attended Soundview's Adlai E. Stevenson High School in his teens. At age 17, the younger Rollack left home and moved in with his father's friend George Wallace, who he referred to as his uncle. In 1993, Rollack re-established the street gang Sex, Money and Murder, which was formed in 1987 in Soundview. His schoolmate David Mullins, who lived in the Castle Hill houses, joined the gang as well. Other members included Robinson Mac 11 Inches Lazala, Jose Green Eyes Rodriguez, Savon Cod, alternatively known as Yaropac, Emilio Leadpipe Romero, Xavier X. Williams, Andre Dula Martin, David Andino, Reginald Big Boo Harris, Sean Shuge Stokes, Rufino Roro Turner, Michael Mo Gray, Raphael Scruffy Moore, and Jasmine Total Package Mansell. The majority of SMM's revenue was generated from distributing cocaine and crack cocaine. Yaropac, a Bronx native who sold crack and cocaine in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, recruited Rollack, who, acting as a lookout and enforcer, began to escort Pac on expeditions to ferry cocaine and crack between New York and Pittsburgh. The two routinely transported approximately 9 kilograms per trip, for which Rollack was paid $3,000 to $5,000. On April 15, 1993, Rollack was convicted of criminal possession of a controlled substance and sentenced to 30 days in prison. On August 16, at the age of 18, Rollack shot Kenyon Jenkins to death. It would be his first killing. Sex, Money and Murder filed incorporation papers in Delaware, forming the company SMMC Inc. The gang opened a business account at State Bank of Long Island. They used a payroll processing company, Paychecks Inc., to process checks and deduct taxes for payroll checks for members of the gang. Gang members obtained cars from Three Rivers Auto, a leasing company in Pittsburgh, through SMMC Inc., most, if not all, equipped with traps and stash boxes, hidden compartments used to conceal cash, drugs, and illegal weapons. At about 2:30 p.m. on April 8th, Rollack killed 23-year-old Carlton Hines, a fellow Bronx native and former high school basketball star turned drug dealer. Rollack shot Hines in the back of the head as he was washing his car at Hand Car Wash. He was found with $5,000 cash in his pocket. Hines's friend, Carlos Mestre, who was with him at the time of the shooting, though wounded, fled the scene. Rollack had previously murdered an associate of Hines's, killed Hines, who was an associate of the local Cortlandt Avenue Crew Street gang, in fear of reprisal when he spotted him as he was entering a shoe store. In June, Rollack murdered another man, Anthony Dunkley. On July 17th, Rollack shot Mestre in the back of the head when he spotted him at a payphone near a Westchester Ave store. In 1994, during a meeting with Rollack and Pack in the Bronx, David Gonzalez convinced Pack that expanding their drug business to North Carolina could be profitable, and the trio made 3 trips during which they transported narcotics to the state. On the second trip, the 3 transported 6 to 8 kilograms from New York to the Carolinas, and sold cocaine in Rockingham and Lumberton, North Carolina, as well as a town in South Carolina. During the trip, Gonzalez introduced Rollack and Pack to his associate David Evans in Charlotte, North Carolina. The 4 of them subsequently scouted locations in the city for use as crack houses, to further expand their narcotics interests. Afterwards, Rollack, Pack, and Gonzalez flew back to New York, leaving the leased burgundy Nissan Quest minivan they used on these trips parked at the airport containing 2 kilograms of cocaine and $70,000 in cash. Within a few days, Pack caught another flight to Charlotte and drove the van back to New York. The next day, Rollack, Pack, and Gonzalez drove the van to meet Covington at a Rockingham fast food restaurant. Unbeknownst to Rollack, Gonzalez called Covington prior to the meet and warned him of Rollack's plans to kill him. Unbeknownst to Rollack and his associates, Covington, who couldn't afford to settle the debt and failed to show up for the meet, had acted as a confidential informant for years and had alerted police the night before and revealed that the van would contain illegal contraband. Rollack, ignoring Gonzalez's attempts to persuade him to leave, suggested driving to Covington's home and murdering his wife and children. He told him, "Ain't nobody gonna live in this world who owe me money." The 3 were confronted by law enforcement while still in the parking lot and asked if a search could be conducted on the van. Pack gave police the keys and signed a vehicle search consent form, which initially yielded no results. Following a conventional search and an exploration by 2 drug-sniffing canines that were brought to the scene, the officers impounded the vehicle. Though they were taken to a local police station, Rollack, Pack, and Gonzalez were not arrested. The 3 presented fake IDs and were released. Rollack used the alias Nathaniel Tucker, Pack used Corey Hines, and Gonzalez gave the name David Richards. After deliberating between the 3 of them, Rollack eventually decided that the trio should wait for the van to be released, as opposed to immediately leaving North Carolina. After posting bail and returning to New York, Rollack was arrested for Hines's killing at Grant's Tomb in Harlem. Because he was carrying a gun at the time of the arrest, he was subsequently convicted of criminal possession of a weapon on August 9, 1995. Rollack received a sentence of 2 to 6 years in prison, which he served at New York's Rikers Island detention facility. He was given a mandatory 8-month jail sentence for weapons possession. During that time he was approached by Omar O.G. McPorty and Leonard Deadeye McKenzie, the founders of the UBN, United Blood Nation Prison Gang, who sought to recruit him into their ranks. The pair created the organization while housed at the George Machen Detention Center on Rikers Island as an exclusively African-American gang in an effort to defend against assaults by members of the largely Hispanic Latin Kings Street Gang and Netta Prison Gang. They modeled UBN on the Los Angeles-based Blood Street Gang, despite having no affiliation with the California organization. After serving the 8 months for gun possession, Rollack was bailed out by his mother Brenda, and proceeded to spread UBN culture throughout SMM and New York. During this time, federal agents in North Carolina matched Rollack's fingerprints from the gun charge to the minivan. He was only free for 2 weeks when he returned to court to face murder charges in connection with Hines's killing, where he was remanded because of the North Carolina narcotics charges. Gonzalez, who'd continued to distribute cocaine in North Carolina with Rollack associate Herschel McNeil, sent Rollack $20,000 towards attorney fees between 1995 and 1996. On November 5, 1996, Carr and another SMM member robbed Soundview Houses residents Valerie and Louis Flythe at gunpoint in their building. After Valerie Flythe picked him out of a police lineup, Carr pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 2 to 4 years in state prison. On January 14, 2004, Carr would be sentenced to life in prison after being found guilty of racketeering, engaging in a narcotics conspiracy, using and carrying a firearm during and in relation to a drug trafficking crime, and distributing and possessing with intent to distribute cocaine base. SMM members Brian Stone Boyd and Romero, who had both testified against other SMM members, testified against Carr at trial as part of their respective plea deals with the government. In 1996, Rollack was transferred to Charlotte to face drug charges. Authorities generally believed that Rollack was still directing the activities of SMM from his jail cell. SMM member Jose Green Eyes Rodriguez shot and killed David Mullins on November 27, Thanksgiving Day, during the annual tag football game between tenants of the Bronx's Castle Hill houses and Soundview houses. Another man, 26-year-old Ephraim Solar, rumored to be a local drug trafficker, was killed as well after being shot in the head and body. 3 other men, David's twin brother Damon, Donald Goodwin Pino, and Nelson Najera, were injured during the shooting. The following day, NYPD officers from the 43rd Precinct stopped every car to check IDs and probe for information related to the shooting. Lazala was the first to be caught. He was stopped by police in the lobby of the Soundview houses on November 29 and arrested for 2 counts of murder in the first degree. On December 17 and 29, ATF agent Terrell A. Tadeo applied for and received search warrants for all of Rollack's non-law-related correspondence to and from the jail. Over the course of the searches of Rollack's cell, approximately 150 of his letters and 52 of his photographs were seized. During the trial, the prosecution presented testimony from Pack, Gonzalez, McNeil, Special Agent Tadeo, Sergeant Louis Savelli of the NYPD Citywide Anti-Gang Enforcement Unit, who testified as an expert witness on the UBN and gang-related codes, and 3 Rockingham, North Carolina police officers. The prosecution also cited quotes Brenda Rollack had given to Street Stories magazine about her son's life. On January 9, 1998, Rollack was convicted of conspiracy to possess with intent to distribute a quantity of cocaine and cocaine base, and knowingly using and carrying a firearm and aiding and abetting such conduct in relation to a drug trafficking crime in the Western District of North Carolina. He was sentenced to 40 years in prison for the drug conviction and 5 years for the gun conviction. On February 7, 1998, a racketeering Bronx rap duo Lord Tariq and Peter Gunz released their first and only album Make It Rain on June 2, 1998. The CD contains the track Sex, Money, Life or Death, which is dedicated to Rollack. Interestingly enough, the music video for the album track, We Will Ball, in part features the 2 and more of their associates playing a game of football. Sean Lord Tariq Hamilton was investigated by the Attorney General's office for his association with Rollack. He told an interviewer that federal agents went so far as to confiscate the footage from his music video shoots. Music video director Chris Robinson, who helmed the accompanying video clip for Lord Tariq and Peter Gunz's hit song Deja Vu, Uptown Baby. He was also questioned by members of the FBI, ATF, and the District Attorney's Office. Ultimately, music executives distanced themselves from the rapper as a result of investigators contacting music label and radio insiders to make queries into the nature of his activities. Meanwhile, SMM members Gilbert Gorgeous Indian Vega and Joey Green Eyes Rodriguez cooperated with the government and confessed to fatally shooting Baith Diop from the back of his livery car in 1995. Eric Glisson, Kathy Watkins and 3 others were erroneously convicted for the murder. Glisson and Watkins were released from prison in 2012 after having served 17 years. In early 2014, Glisson filed a civil suit against New York City and 4 NYPD officers alleging that Bronx Homicide Police fabricated evidence and false witness testimony. Vega also pleaded guilty to driving the getaway vehicle following a robbery and murder at an auto parts store in Hunts Point in 1999. In 1999, Rollack, Robinson Lazala, Michael Gay, Reginald Harris, David Andino, and 6 other SMM members were named in a 28-count federal indictment. The government sought the death penalty against Rollack, who was charged with RICO violations, 5 murders, 5 attempted murders, 2 conspiracies to commit murder, and narcotics trafficking. In January of 2000, Rollack pleaded guilty to 6 counts of murder. Judge Miriam Goldman Cedarbaum sentenced him to life in solitary confinement plus 105 years without parole on November 8th. He was also ordered to pay $25,400 for the funeral expenses of his victims. Teresa Hines, mother of Carlton Hines, attended the sentencing hearing and addressed the court. Less than a day after his sentencing, posters bearing Rollack's mugshot and describing the length of term given by the judge were distributed throughout the Bronx by members of the NYPD's 43rd Precinct. In December, Rollack was transported to the federal supermax facility in Florence, Colorado. By 2003, he had earned his GED. Though a supervisor at the ADX facility recommended that he be placed in general population with other inmates in 2005, Rollack has remained in solitary confinement since his incarceration. Rollack penned the handwritten 150-page novel, Trigga, in his cell, which he self-published with the help of family members in 2006. Prison officials refused to allow Rollack to receive a finished copy. Peter Rollack, aka Pistol Pete, is currently undergoing the most serious penal conditions. ADX prisoners live in near-continuous solitary confinement inside a soundproof 7 by 12-foot cell, a controversial policy that prison reform advocates have decried. Pending good behavior, prisoners can earn 10 or more hours per week handcuffed outside of their cells in a caged confinement or a concrete pit. Up to 4 15-minute phone calls are allowed per month, and visitation rights are significantly restricted if allowed at all. As of July 2024, ADX incarcerates 335 men convicted of federal crimes. In other words, these inmates aren't your white-collar criminals. We're talking serial killers, terrorists, mobsters, cult leaders, drug kingpins, and offenders who have proven themselves adept at escape, prone to violence, or otherwise unreformable. In 1990, after a 4-month trial, Leonard Rollack was convicted of participating in a racketeering enterprise in violation of the RICO Act. He was sentenced to 50 years in prison, but his conviction was reversed on appeal. Rollack rejected another plea deal, this one for 20 years, and following a retrial in 1992, he was again convicted and again received a 50-year sentence. And as always, although there are convictions in this matter, I must stress that an indictment is not evidence of guilt. Charges are only allegations, and each defendant is presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe. Blessings. Luke 17:3-4. If your brother sins, rebuke him, and if he repents, forgive him.